Alright. Every time Mike outsmarted his enemies.
From getting Tuco arrested to making fools out of the DEA. Here is every time Mike Ehrmantraut outsmarted his enemies in Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. Starting with setting up Tuco. After moving to the ABQ, Mike started working as a parking booth attendant and avoided anything that could bring attention his way. But he still needed extra cash to help support his daughter-in-law Stacy and his granddaughter Kaylee, who doesn't age, and that slowly pushed him back into the criminal world. Mike ended up working security for Daniel Wormold, the pill dealer known as Price. During one of those jobs, Mike crossed paths with Nacho Varga, who was secretly operating behind his boss Tuco Salamanca's back. Their relationship shifted after Mike was forced to step in when Nacho stole Price's money and baseball cards, and with Price panicking, he contacted the police. Not everybody who wears glasses is smart, it seems. Mike then tracked down Nacho and forced a deal where he returned the cards and the cash. But that's when he came to Mike with a much bigger problem. Nacho explained that Tuco was becoming more unstable by the day. To make his fear clear, Nacho told Mike about Doug Paulson.
Our connect was a guy called Dog Paulson. One day, Tuco's settling up with Dog. He decides to put on his lie detector. But suddenly he's got a sawed off and right in Dog's face. I was behind him.
He believed it was only a matter of time before Tuco turned that same violence onto him. Mike, he listened to Nacho's idea and didn't dismiss it right away. He came close to going through with it, even going as far as nearly buying a rifle.
Single shot, bolt, simple, effective, reliable.
But the more he considered it, he realized killing a Salamanca wouldn't end it. It would only start something bigger. Mike made it clear that Tuco dying would only make things worse, and if Tuco was going to be removed, it had to be quietly. So that's when Michael proposed a different situation. Instead of killing Tuco, he would get him off of the streets in a way that solved Nacho's problem permanently without anyone asking who pulled the trigger. Nacho didn't fully understand how that was even possible, but he let Mike go through with it and do his thing. And when the day of came, Mike set the plan in motion. Using a payphone, he anonymously tipped the police off that a man was threatening someone with a gun at a nearby restaurant.
Yes, I would like to report a fight going on at the El Machicano restaurant in the 5000 block of Isleta Boulevard.
With the police already on their way, Mike drove into the parking lot and deliberately hit Tuco's car. It was minor, but it was enough to trigger Tuco. And, really anything is enough to trigger Tuco, to be honest. But anyway, Mike went inside, casually ordered some yummy, delicious food, and he's acting as if nothing had happened, like an old guy. When Tuco followed Mike outside, though, Mike simply disagreed with Tuco, brushed him off, and acted like he wasn't worth responding to. Mike was rage-baiting before rage-baiting was even a thing. And Tuco, he demanded money for the car damages, but Mike refused and offered to exchange insurance information instead.
You see that? You did that.
Oh, come on, that'll buff right out.
Inside the restaurant, Tuco had already seen the cash in Mike's wallet, so when Mike claimed he didn't have any money, Tuco knew he was lying. Mike, he kept ignoring him too, tried to walk away and refused to engage, pushing Tuco closer to snapping. The situation had escalated exactly as planned though. Tuco showed Mike his gun and forced him to hand over his wallet. As police sirens began to approach, Nacho slipped away with the drug money. Tuco tried to leave too, but Mike stopped him. He grabbed Tuco and forced him into a situation where violence was his only option. Mike disarmed him, leaving Tuco with nothing but his fists. And Tuco beat Mike repeatedly while he stayed just conscious enough to keep provoking him, making sure the assault didn't stop.
I'm probably not really going to watch it.
They clearly saw an angry Tuco.
Plus, I'm not going to remember this, so it's fine.
Dog, Mike has balls of steel.
When I started, if I started eventually, I'm not going to remember it.
But Tuco was arrested on the spot and was facing years in prison for assault, while Mike
will probably forget all this happened.
And $50K cash. Not a bad deal. The home intruder's trap. A few days after Tuco was arrested, Hector Salamanca tried to manipulate Mike into helping reduce Tuco's prison sentence. He offered Mike $5,000 to claim the illegal gun found during Tuco's arrest belonged to him.
My favorite show is The Walking Dead.
Mike refused, and Hector made it clear that saying no was not an option. The next day, Mike returned home from his shift carrying groceries and noticed one of Hector's men,
Like,
Arturo,
IRL
and his
show.
hair sitting on his front steps.
As in-
Arturo told him Hector wanted an answer regarding the gun, but Mike declined again and continued inside. Mike knew that Hector's men would return, so he began preparing carefully.
He could have
taped
never
carbon
known.
paper onto his
I
welcome
know,
mat
right?
to detect footprints and placed it back on the doorstep, ensuring any intruders would leave clear evidence of their presence. Later that night, when Mike returned home, he lifted the mat and found fresh
So the
footprints
work
pressed into the
down.
carbon paper. The door lock appeared to have been tampered with, and Mike knew armed men were already inside of his house. But instead of panicking, Mike took out his gun
Obsessed
and
with
began
Michonne. I love
methodically checking
Michonne.
the house, moving from room to room. And when he found no one, he realized the intruders were hiding, waiting for him to make the first mistake. So instead of
She's so
confronting them
cool
blindly,
and, like,
Mike grabbed
funny
the TV
and
remote
badass.
and turned on a loud Billy Mays ad, rest in peace. Then the sudden noise, it forced the cartel members to reveal themselves. As the two men stepped out of the room, Mike used the door to knock out one of them and then pistol whipped Arturo.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you believe that.
In seconds, Mike had taken control and disarmed both of them. Arturo explained that they had only been sent to intimidate him into accepting Hector's deal, and all Mike had to do was say yes.
You try harder next time. Get out.
Robbing Hector's truck. But when Hector Salamanca threatened Mike's granddaughter Kaylee, everything changed. At first, Mike did what Hector wanted. He was called to a closed ice
Are you
cream shop
showing us
where Hector
ads?
told Mike to go to the district
Bro.
attorney and claimed that the gun used in Tuco's arrest belonged to him. Mike agreed, but he wanted to be paid and asked for $50,000. When Hector refused and threatened his family, Mike reached for his pistol.
I got my money. Or neither of us walk out of here.
You willing to die for this?
Maybe I need the 50,000 more than you do.
Hector, impressed by Mike's courage, agreed to pay the full amount. On the surface, it looked like Hector had won. Tuco's sentence was reduced and Mike had backed down. But Mike, he took the threat against Kaylee personally and decided to target one of Hector's cash trucks, hitting the Salamanca operation where it would hurt the most. He began by studying the Salamanca supply network. From staking out the Regalo Helado ice cream shop, Mike learned the patterns of Hector's cash deliveries.
I would not be able to pronounce that Spanish name.
He discovered that the money was hidden inside the rear tires of the trucks, making it almost invisible and difficult to access. He also identified the best location to intercept one of the trucks, a remote stretch of desert road, isolated enough to avoid witnesses. Mike, he constructed a spike strip out of a garden hose with long nails, and on the day of the heist, he positioned himself behind a decaying billboard, completely hidden from view. When the truck approached, Mike waited for the perfect moment and then triggered the spike strip. The tires blew instantly, setting the truck off the road and into a ditch.
Wow.
The driver, Jimenez Lacerda, I bet you didn't know his name, instinctively reached for his gun, but as he stepped outside to take a look, Mike quietly pulled up behind him. He pressed the barrel to the back of the driver's head, disarmed him, and then tied him up with duct tape, leaving him alive but completely unable to interfere. Mike then turned his attention to the tires, and using an electric saw, he cut into the rubber and carefully extracted the hidden cash.
Yeah, that is really smart, though.
He loaded the money and his equipment into his car and disappeared before anyone could connect him to the scene. Staging the border bust. After robbing Hector's truck, Mike was ready to go even further. This guy's got nothing better to do, and I love it. He planned to kill Hector himself. He tracked Hector down to a remote desert shack, sniper rifle in hand, ready to end the threat once and for all. But just as he was about to take the shot, someone intervened. Later, when Mike finally met Gus Fring, he learned exactly why his plan had been stopped.
It's not in my interest for Hector Salamanca to die.
at this
It's
time.
always Gus.
But while Gus stopped Mike from killing Hector, he allowed him to continue disrupting Hector's operations in other ways. This gave Mike an opportunity to strike back at Hector without risking direct confrontation or bloodshed, and he could do it under the radar. Mike decided to target Hector's supply
Gustav.
lines. He
Yeah,
needed a way to
it's
ensure
Gustav.
one of Hector's trucks would be caught by authorities, but he didn't want to create unnecessary violence or alert the cartel. So, to prepare, Mike met with Dr. Barry Goodman, a contact provided by Gus, and requested a small amount of cocaine, in which he used a part of it as a clever trap.
Well, I need a package yay big.
He then placed the powder inside of a sneaker, tied the pair together, and set up the shoes over a power line along a road frequently used by Hector's drivers. And this is one of my favorite parts in the whole series. From a sniper's nest overlooking the road, Mike watched the approach of one of Hector's trucks. When the vehicle stopped at a dead drop to leave weapons behind before reaching the border, Mike fired several shots into the air to make it look like there was a hunter nearby and to dismiss any future gunshots. Mike then waited for the truck to move directly under the power line. Using his rifle, Mike shot the sneakers, causing the cocaine to spill onto the truck's roof and the rear steps. The powder coated the vehicle just enough to ensure it would be detected later. After the truck continued onto the border, the plan? It worked perfectly. Drug-sniffing
that's
dogs
kinda
at the
smart.
checkpoint detected the residue, prompting a full search, and the authorities discovered the hidden shipment, and the truck's drivers were arrested.
Get down on your knees!
Hector's supply line, it was disrupted, and leaving him scrambling to find a new route, and the cartel suffered a financial hit without ever understanding how or why it happened. Outsmarting Lalo in the parking garage. Alright guys, so now we've got Werner Ziegler, Gus Fring's lead engineer for the underground super lab, and he had escaped his high security quarters. Homesick for his wife Marguerite, he used a laser pointer to blind the cameras and slipped out through the roof, landing a brief meeting with her. Mike quickly tracked Werner down using a travel wire agent, but he soon realized he wasn't the only
he
one
is
following
really
the
smart,
engineer.
though.
Lalo Salamanca had entered the chat and had noticed his movements and was following him. Mike knew that if Lalo reached Werner, it could ruin everything, so he needed a way to lose him. He pulled Mike into a gated parking garage with Lalo following closely behind and started preparing one of his smartest tricks ever. Mike had chewed a piece of gum, flattened it, and wrapped it carefully in its foil.
Yeah, I
and
feel
as
like
another
I
car was
could.
about to exit through the gate, Mike quickly saw an opportunity. He cut in front of the car, pulled up to the toll booth, and then inserted the gum into the ticket machine, blocking the next cars from getting their tickets and exiting. The first car got stuck and Lalo was directly behind it.
I'm
He
very
was forced
slippery,
to
you know?
stop as well. Mike calmly drove away, and while Lalo, he remained trapped by the disabled machine and the other vehicle. Lalo then tried to force his way out and rammed the car in front of him,
Damn.
pushing both vehicles against the gate, but by the time he managed to clear the gate, Mike had already disappeared. Lalo's hit and run in the parking garage, it eventually worked in Mike's favor too. He later used this incident to link Lalo to the murder of Fred Whalen at Travel Wire, which ultimately led to Lalo's
Fortunate for that
arrest.
guy. No, actually, though, he was just sipping away, and then all of a sudden, boom!
The balloon decoy. But it's insane what Mike could do with ordinary things like using balloons to outsmart 4 cartel hitmen. Chow, he was Gus Fring's main chemical supplier, and when he stopped returning calls, Gus sent his one-man army, Mike. When Mike arrived at Chow's warehouse, the situation became clear almost immediately. Chow was being held hostage inside of his own building by cartel hitmen. They hadn't killed him, but they had taken control of the warehouse and locked everything down. Mike understood right away that walking in guns blazing, it would be reckless. The building was filled with armed men. Chow was inside, and any mistake could get him killed. He needed an advantage before he ever stepped through the door. So Mike, he took a bundle of mylar balloons filled with helium and used them to short out the power lines feeding the warehouse. And the moment the balloons touched the wires, the electricity cut out completely. So 2 cartel gunmen stepped outside to see what caused the blackout. Mike positioned himself carefully, waiting for them to line up, and fired a single shot. 1 bullet dropped both men instantly. As he walked past them, he fired extra rounds to make sure they were dead. Inside the warehouse, the darkness worked in his favor. Mike removed Chow's secretary's shoes and tossed it down
Yeah,
the
I
hallway.
remember
The sound
this.
echoed in the dark, and one of the hitmen panicked, running
This
towards the
was
noise.
really cool
and
to
before
see.
he even realized what was happening, Mike shot him in the back. And that left only one man. As Mike approached the room where Chow was being held, he immediately noticed by the look on Chow's face that someone was still inside. Without saying a word, Mike used hand signals to direct Chow to show him where the last gunman was hiding. And he fired through the wall and eliminated the final threat. I love this so much. And with the danger
That is really
neutralized,
cool, though.
Mike turned his attention to Chow. And even after saving him, Mike wanted to make it clear that Chow had failed to report the cartel's presence quickly enough. Mike reached for his gun, ready to shoot Chow in the hand, but paused to ask if his secretary could drive him to the hospital.
Licensed, dependable.
She has a Camry.
Mike then knew it was safe to proceed and shot him in the hand as a warning. Even as Chow prepared to leave, Mike called him back, reminding him,
Gonna need a shoe.
outsmarting Chris with a toy. While Mike successfully saved Chow back in Season 3, his story ended very differently in Season 5. After Gus Fring's death, everything that had once protected Mike and his people was gone. Several of Gus's former associates were now in DEA custody, and Lydia, she was panicking, as she so often does. She was convinced those men would eventually talk and expose her, so she went to Mike
This is
first
Chris
and
from
asked him
Sonic
to
X.
have them killed.
That's
You
great.
want me to kill every man on that list?
But when Mike refused, instead of pushing him further, she went around him and hired Chris Morrow, one of Mike's former enforcers. Chris, you see, had lost his hazard pay after the DEA seized his money, and he was desperate. Lydia used that desperation, offering $10,000 for each man on her list, and $30,000 to kill Mike himself. Chris first captured Chow inside Chow's own house and forced him at gunpoint to call Mike. Chow told Mike the DEA had seized his offshore money and asked him to come over so they could talk in person. And as soon as the call ended, Chris, he shot Chow in the head, killing him before Mike even arrived. When Mike pulled up to Chow's house, he immediately sensed something was wrong. Mike got out of his car and walked straight towards the front door. And inside the house, Chris watched him through the peephole. But as Mike got closer, Chris stopped looking and raised his gun, lighting it up with the peephole. Then, something unexpected happened. A strange noise started at the door. Chris hesitated, and he leaned back towards the peephole to see what it was. And instead of Mike, he saw a small motorized toy hanging from the doorframe, tapping against the door. But while Chris was distracted by the toy, Mike quietly slipped inside the house using the back door.
I'd like you to drop your gun.
Mike, he sat Chris down and forced him to explain everything. And Chris admitted Lydia hired him.
I figured I'd start with you. For you, she was gonna pay 30.
He even tried to justify it by saying he needed the money.
He's
Mike listened.
really
I'm
smart,
sorry about
though.
this, Mike, but I need the money. Those feds, they took it all, man.
But before Chris could finish speaking, Mike shot him multiple times, killing him instantly.
Mike.
If you don't want to blend in, find a way to stand out. Become a CPA.
Any woman can get a vaginal yeast infection. Treat the
What?
symptoms and the cause with Canestin.
Bro, stop giving me those ads,
The
please.
Philadelphia ambush. Before Albuquerque, Mike Ehrmantraut was a police officer in Philly. His son Matt was a cop too, and when Matty refused to go along with corruption in his department, his own partners Hoffman and Fensky, they killed him. Mike knew they were responsible, but there was no proof and no way to bring them in legally. And after Matty's death, Mike, he fell apart. He drank constantly and stopped caring about
Why,
how he
that's what
looked or
Jeff-
where
no,
he ended up.
actually.
To everyone watching, he seemed like a broken man who had nothing left. Hoffman and Fensky
know you're
believed that
interested
too,
in
which is
drugs.
exactly what Mike wanted. What they didn't know was that Mike was planning everything. One night, Mike broke into a police cruiser that belonged to Hoffman and Fensky. He hid a gun between the backseat cushions, putting everything back the way it was, and walked away. Later that same night, Mike went into the bar and started drinking, making sure Hoffman and Fensky noticed him. And y'all, he played the role perfectly, slurring his words and stumbling as he walked. Eventually, he made his way over to their table, threw his arms around their shoulders, and pulled them in real close and said,
I know it was you.
They laughed it off, but the moment, it stuck with them. When the bar closed, Mike was the last customer to leave. As he staggered down the street, Hoffman and Fensky pulled up in their cruiser and offered him a ride. Mike, he refused at first, still acting drunk, but they insisted. They took his gun too, put him in the back seat, and drove off. And during the ride, Fensky asked Mike what he meant by what he said earlier.
You killed him. You killed Manny. And you killed him for nothing. You killed him because you were scared what you thought he might do.
That's when they decided Mike was a problem. They drove him far out of the city into an abandoned area, and as they got out of the car, Mike quietly reached into the backseat and pulled out the gun he had planted earlier, hiding it under his jacket. The two cops dragged him out, leaned him against a street lamp, and stepped away to talk. Fensky suggested they make it look like a suicide using the gun they had taken from Mike earlier, but Mike, completely sober now, complimented his plan.
Smart. That's what I would have done if I were you.
And that's when they realized they had been outsmarted. Mike drew the hidden gun and aimed at them. Fensky tried to shoot back, only to discover the gun he had taken from Mike was unloaded. Mike shot Hoffman immediately, and Fensky managed to hit Mike in the shoulder before Mike fired again, hitting him in the neck. As Fensky tried to crawl away, Mike walked over and stepped on his leg to stop him from reaching his weapon. Fensky begged for his life, but Mike, he didn't hesitate. He shot him, took his gun, and walked away. The tracking device reversal. After robbing Hector Salamanca's truck and taking the $250,000 hidden inside, Mike thought he could cover his tracks, but the consequences quickly caught up with him. Nacho warned him that Hector was furious and that a random person who had stopped to help the truck driver had been killed by the cartel to cover the incident.
After you left, the Good Samaritan came along and said, "Oh my God, oh my God." He cut the driver loose. The driver called us. We came out, got the truck. Hector shot him in the face.
Feeling the weight of that unintended death, Mike considered taking matters into his own hands and assassinating Hector. He bought a black market sniper rifle and tracked Hector to a remote shack in the desert, ready to end the threat once and for all. And just as he...
Yo, I got a question for y'all. Do y'all ever have one of those stretches where your legs just start violently shaking? Yo, I just had one of those. My legs just started shaking like crazy. But those are the best stretches, though.
Was about to take the shot, Mike heard his own car horn in the distance. He returned to his vehicle and found a branch
Are you
jammed
okay?
against the
Yes.
horn, along with a note on the windshield that simply said, That moment made it clear that someone had been tracking him, and Mike knew he had to find the bug before he could take any further action. He took his station wagon to a junkyard and began dismantling.
Have you ever
piece
had
by
those kind of
piece,
stretches?
searching for any hidden evidence. He checked the chassis, the interior, even the wiring, but found nothing. But one part that he hadn't examined closely was his gas cap, and when he disassembled it, he discovered a small battery-operated tracker hidden inside. I have never seen that in any piece of media elsewhere. And Mike immediately devised a counterplan. He bought an identical tracker from Dr. Caldera and learned how the device worked. It sent a signal whenever the battery was low. So using this knowledge, he hooked the original tracker to a handheld radio to drain its battery, making it appear almost dead, while secretly installing his new tracker in the gas cap. So he stayed awake all night, watching his car, and in the early morning, someone finally arrived to replace the supposedly failing tracker. Unaware he was being set up, the man removed the tracker from Mike's car and replaced it with a fresh one. What he didn't know was that the device that he took was now Mike's tracker. Once the man drove off, Mike activated his receiver and followed the signal, tracking the man step by step back to the source. This lead eventually brought him to Los Pollos Hermanos and his first meeting with Gus Fring. The DEA versus Mike. With Gus Fring dead, the authorities turned their attention to anyone connected to his operation. Mike's name came up because of offshore bank accounts Gus used to pay his associates. Interrogation at the DEA field office. You see, Mike was called to the DEA Albuquerque field office where he was questioned by Hank and Gomi.
I mean, given your history, doing background checks on pimple-faced fry cooks seems like overkill. What else you do for fun?
As Hank pressed him further and brought up Gus's drug empire,
Probably
I
for the
absolutely
past, like,
love
4
the way
hours.
Mike plays it off here.
Drug empire. First time hearing about that.
And that's when Mike asked if he was under arrest. And when Hank said,
Forget your handcuffs. I'm confused. Am I under arrest here or am I not?
You are not under arrest.
Mike simply got up to leave, but just as he was about to walk out, Hank mentioned something that stopped Mike.
And I suppose we could talk about the $2 million in your granddaughter's name.
Hank explained how Gus had offshore accounts and they were all in the names of people who were on his payroll, but there was one account that stood out the most.
Right. One of the names was Kaylee Ehrmantraut. $2 million and change we found on deposit for her. He took one look at that and said, "Shit, man. This 5th grade girl is the muscle behind Frank's entire operation." I said, whoa, hey, brother, slow down, man. Maybe it was actually her dear old granddaddy.
Gomez added that the government might allow Kaylee to keep some of that money if Mike cooperated and told them everything he knew about Gus's operation. But Mike once again denied any knowledge of the money, and he left.
I don't know anything about any money. I don't know what you're talking about.
The park surveillance and the fuck you note. The DEA continued to follow Mike, trying to catch him moving money or setting up a dead drop. One day, he was at a park with Kaylee when Gomez and Van Oster watched him from a distance. Mike noticed the surveillance and decided to play a small, clever trick. Before leaving, he scribed a note and tucked it under a nearby trash can. Gomi thought it was a dead drop.
How tall are
you,
you,
the spot, expecting to see a secret handoff or evidence, he found only the note, which simply read, Mike had used the note to silently mock them, proving he was always aware of their presence. The final DEA chase. Eventually, the DEA managed to pressure Mike's lawyer, Dan Washburger, into cooperating. While Mike was at a park with Kaylee, Walt warned him that the DEA was closing in, and preparing to arrest him. Mike realized that if he tried to stay with Kaylee, both of them could get caught. So, with no other choice, Mike abandoned the park, leaving Kaylee behind just long enough to escape. Moments later, the DEA arrived, but Mike was already gone. His careful planning and ability to stay calm under pressure allowed him to avoid capture, but this escape would directly lead to his final confrontation with Walter White, where Walt's ego gets Mike killed.
Shut the fuck up. Let me die in peace.
All right, y'all, so